Hey guys, welcome to the chaos that is my house right now. I just went to IKEA and there's stuff everywhere. That's gonna be the theme for the next little bit. I am filming a vlog with some of my IKEA trip stuff in there, so that will be coming up. Should be later this week. But now we are on to the May reading wrap up. I tried throughout May to do a couple check-ins with some of the books that I read. I have found over the years that it works better for me to do a wrap-up shortly after reading a book, especially in a season when life has been busy, because I forget things. I get excited to talk about a book shortly after I've read it, but as time goes on, I feel like that motivation to talk about the book, unless I loved it, it kind of tends to go down. So I filmed 2 wrap-ups throughout May, and then I filmed I will film the rest of it here right away. So I didn't do as good of a job throughout May sharing what I read as quickly as I would like, but it was a crazy month. Giving myself grace for that. For June, I would be curious to hear what you guys think. I have been tempted to try doing more like filming my review, or it's not really reviews, just talking about the books that I read right after I read them and putting them up as shorts. So there'll be like 1 short per book that I read. I might do that. I might continue to do the way I've been doing it for the last while. I don't know. I like to switch it up every now and then. I don't want to do a full dedicated review in a long video format for every book I read. That doesn't seem interesting to me. But I don't know, I'm kind of interested in spicing it up. There's definitely going to be more shorts in the month of June, maybe the whole summer. We'll see. But yeah, anyway, let's start rolling into the books that I read in May. It was a weird month. Lots of audiobooks because of packing and unpacking and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. Welcome to week 1. I finished 2 books, neither of which have been winners. The first one is Belladonna. I read, I think, just over half of this, and then I just kind of skimmed to the end. I was hopeful, tried to lower my expectations. Cover by, fantasy story. We follow this girl named Signa who has a lot of money coming to her, but the people in her life keep dying, and then she goes to like some other relative and people just keep dying. And she can see death and has some kind of magic where she can't die. So I was feeling a little like, I don't know, uncertain towards the magic. So she could like tap into death's magic, but she was like using it for good. She was trying to keep people alive. But I felt like weird about that to begin with. And then like when I kind of stopped reading it and just kind of skimmed to see how it ends, then things got really weird. I just really wouldn't recommend this. She has this relationship with death that crosses some lines, and disappointing. But at least I know I can take the next 2 books off of my like radar, though they have pretty covers. Once again, wouldn't recommend it. The next book I finished, I do own, but it's already packed away. So I was listening to the audiobook for The Shadows of Swanford, Abbey. And I keep gravitating towards this author's books because we have the same last name. And I keep wanting to like them, and they keep being like a pretty solid like 3-star, very predictable. Like if you like her books, I feel like if you like one, you're probably gonna like them all because they're very similar. So this one we are set, I can't remember the exact time period, Victorian-ish era, and our main character is a lady's companion. She is having a little holiday, going back home to visit her brother. Her brother suffers from like some mental illness, and he had a story that he wrote that got plagiarized. Like this author that he was working for took the story and put his name on it years ago, and her brother is like still like really stuck on this fact. And so he has a new book that he has written that he wants his sister to put into the hands of this author, and like he's made copies and stuff so that if the author does try to steal it this time, he can, you know, like have proof that it was his story. And there's some mysterious things going on. So our main character Rebecca is staying at this like hotel that used to be an abbey, and there's a story of a ghost abbess coming and going, and she actually sees it. And then there is a murder that takes place, and like these are all really cool elements for a story for me, but for various reasons it just really didn't work for me. I think part of it has to do with like the whole love interest. I often struggle with Christian fiction, especially Christian historical fiction. It's so obvious all the time. I like more mystery, more unsuspecting, I don't know, like more times where the unexpected happens. The mystery part of the story I enjoyed, but just the general storyline, not as much. So not a solid start to the month, but I have a feeling I'll be listening to a lot of audiobooks, so hopefully I'll have some winners in there yet. Okay, this feels weird. I know this is my last video clip filming in this house, which, I mean, it doesn't look like much anymore because most everything's packed up, but I wanted to quickly do a little recap of the books that I've read in the last week or so. I've been doing a lot of audiobooks as we've been packing, and I know if I don't do this now, by the time I have time to do it, I'm gonna have forgot some details. So the first book that I finished, I got out on audiobook, and I don't actually own this physical book, but a lot of people recommended it, so I got it out. It's The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is the first book. Is it a trilogy? Kind of think it's a trilogy. Yeah. So it's a 3-book series. It's a fantasy, like medieval fantasy story where we start out with a princess who is supposed to get married. She doesn't want to marry this guy, so she runs away, like on her wedding day, I think it was, and she runs to this remote village, and we alternate between her perspective, the prince's perspective, and like the whole reason she didn't want to get married is because it was an arranged marriage, and she really wanted to marry for love. She's never met the prince. So we alternate between her perspective, the prince's perspective, and then an assassin's perspective. So this guy has been sent to kill her because things are in a little bit of a chaos, I guess, between a couple different countries. And so it's very interesting to see the different perspectives, even see like the same scene through different eyes. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I do think I will continue with the series. There is a wait for, through my library for the audiobook for book 2, so it'll be a little while. But I was invested enough to want to continue. The fantasy side of this is definitely present, like it definitely is a fantasy story, but it leans more towards like a medieval history type story because the fantasy is a fairly low key, like the magic that exists there, it is there, but it's pretty low key. So I enjoyed that. Then the next book I finished was Winterheart, which was interesting reading these two. I was listening to the one and like physically reading this one because there's some similarities. So right at the beginning of this book, we have a prince who there's like an attempted assassination. So he runs away to a different kingdom. So instead of a princess running away, we got a prince running away, and he ends up getting connected with the apprentice to the head mage. She's our main character, and the prince has grown up in a kingdom where there isn't magic, or that's not true, there is magic, but it's like really frowned upon. So he's like afraid of this mage apprentice, as well as he gets to know the head mage, and then learns that magic isn't as scary as he thought. And meanwhile, there is also a sickness that is going around through the country, and so I really appreciated that this book had a pronunciation guide right at the beginning, because the characters' names are, I don't know if they're like Scandinavian, they kind of feel a little bit like Irish, but we've got Neve is our main character, and Fane, and some of these look very Scandinavian with the pronunciation, so I appreciate the guide right at the beginning. It doesn't give any spoilers, it's just how to pronounce names and places. So Neve is our apprentice, and she and the head mage Hale are trying to figure out what the sickness is. She's going around and going to the different towns trying to figure it out, And this book reminded me a little bit of The Kiss of Deception, possibly because I was also reading it at the same time. It also, this sickness, it has like a black oozing thing, which reminded me a little bit of Frank Peretti's The Oath. Overall, I really enjoyed it. This was sent to me by the author. I have raved about this cover before. The cover is very fitting. My only con is there's a few little, some slight grammatical errors and like some formatting things, which weren't a huge bother, but just a little bit. So if you're like really sticky on that kind of stuff, just be forewarned if it bothers you. There is some of that in here, but I enjoyed the story, and this is going to be a series, and I plan on continuing it. The next book I finished, I own the physical copy of, but it's packed away. I listened to the audiobook for Queen Victoria, 24 Days That Changed Her Life by Lucy Worsley. Oh, I forgot to say the author on this one. I don't always say the author. H.D. Fox. There you go. Queen Victoria, this made me want to read the rest of Lucy Worsley's books that she has done, like different biographies on people. This was so interesting. So it takes 24 days or groupings of days, some of them span a couple of days, that were pivotal to Queen Victoria's life. The timing was perfect because coming up here in a couple of days in Canada, we have on the 3rd Monday of May is Victoria Day. No one actually celebrates Victoria at all. It's just a stat holiday that everyone gets off. And when I lived in England, the people I was living with, they were like, why do you have Victoria Day? And it's actually been celebrated in Canada since like I don't know, I can't remember exact year, we did look it up, but it's been celebrated here for a long time, like since she was reigning. And so that was fascinating. And I felt like the book did such a good job of just focusing on different days and not losing a person in the monotony of like the life of a queen. I would highly recommend it. I do already have the audiobook for her Jane Austen book queued up. I haven't started it. Tempted to leave that till Jane Austen July. We'll see. But definitely recommend that. And then it also made me want to look for a great biography for Queen Elizabeth II, because I wasn't very interested in Queen Victoria exactly, but Queen Elizabeth II, I am fascinated by her life and would like to know more about that. So I've been doing some research. I think I have one that I'm going to read at some point for her. And then the last book was a homeschool book for the children's sake by Susan Schaefer Macaulay. This is Foundations of Education for Home and School. And so this is kind of just like an introduction to the Charlotte Mason homeschool method. This was originally written in 1984, was very like revolutionary at the time. Susan Schaefer Macaulay went on to get Charlotte Mason's works republished. So now I felt like reading it, it was good, but it wasn't as eye-opening as maybe it would have been in 1984, or it would be for someone that hasn't read Charlotte Mason's works or read much about her works. I am doing a book club on my homeschool membership for this. I'm breaking down the chapters and doing different videos and discussion for these. So that's all I'll say. The last 3 books that I read, this one, and the Queen Victoria one, I gave them all 5 stars. Next time I see you, or am going to film a clip here, I guess we'll be in our new house. It's boggling my brain right now. Okay, and now we are on to the final books that I read in May. So I have to pull up my Goodreads because, you know, I just totally forgot about what I had read. So it's pretty much the second half of May that I have books to share about. The first one that I finished next was The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. Normally we do a monthly page count reading challenge over on my Patreon. We all just pick like a page count we want to hit and then try our best to hit it during a week or a weekend, depending what we do that month. In May, I decided to do something different. I had started so many books. For my goal, I just wanted to finish books more than get a high page count. I knew if I said, oh, I want to hit this many pages, I would put off certain books and not finish them and just start more books. But I did say I was going to finish this one. So I listened to The Professor. That helped a lot. I didn't have to sit down and read it. I ended up giving The Professor by Charlotte Bronte 3 stars on Goodreads. I feel like that's a bit generous. This book started out so boring. I think at 50% I was still like bored out of my mind. It did get a bit better, but not a whole lot. So this is the first book she ever wrote. I can't remember if this was the first one published. So it says here that she would later rework the heartfelt story with a woman as the leading character in Villette. I have Villette. I would like to read it. I don't know. This made me kind of want to read it right away because it's kind of the same story-ish. But also, this made me want to wait a while because this was so boring. I hope Villette is better. So in this one, we follow a young man. He is trying to figure out what to do with his life. He tries to go into trades, and then he ends up becoming a professor. And it's just, the writing felt so very classic first person, the classic first person kind of feel to it. I don't know if I can describe it, but as I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this just reminds me of so many other books. Can't even remember what our character's name is. William Crimsworth. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I read it, checked a box, read a classic, read another Charlotte Bronte. Definitely not my favorite. There are so many extra noises that come along with the new house. The guys are drilling for air conditioning downstairs. There's tractors outside. I don't know. Okay, The Lost Library by Rebecca Stead and Wendy Mass. This is a middle grade book about a little free library that pops up in a small town. Our main character, he kind of stumbles across a bit of a mystery when he gets a book out from the little free library and finds out that this really famous author potentially was the last person to take it out. Plus all the books from the little free library were, how did it work? They were all returned to the library on the same day, and that is the day the library burnt down years before. And so there's a mystery that our main character is trying to figure out. And overall, I did enjoy it. I think I gave it 4 stars. It was a good read. I can imagine my son will enjoy it. We'll see. Next up was, The Nature of Fragile Things by Susan Meisner. I just realized I read 2 of her books this month. Did I read The Last Year of the War this month? I can't remember if I read it. According to Goodreads, I finished it on the 30th. Did I talk about it in my wrap-up then? I don't remember. Anyway, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. So in this one, we follow Sophie Whalen. She answers a mail order bride advertisement. She's living in New York. She goes to live in San Francisco with his widower and his daughter. And you can tell, okay, first of all, it's not your typical like mail order bride book, okay? But you can tell right off the bat that there's something's not adding up, and we can't tell what it is. It's kind of slowly revealed throughout, and then Sophie says some things, like she has some kind of past that she's not willing to fully share with people. And so I felt like I was always like, what's going on? Like something's fishy. And I really enjoyed that. I don't feel like I can say much more without giving spoilers, and I really enjoyed following along. I guess what I should say is this happens right around the San Francisco earthquake and the fires that ensue after. So this is April 18th, 1906, kind of around then. This is one of my favorite Susan Meisner's now, I would say. I still can't remember if this is one I'm going to be talking about in this video or if I talked about it in April, but I really enjoyed The Last Year of the War too. She has some good ones, and then some that I found were kind of duds. According to my Goodreads, the next thing, The Watchmaker's Daughter. I pretty much listened to that entire thing while we were driving out to Edmonton. So I gave this one 4 stars. This is a fantasy story by C.J. Archer, and we follow a watchmaker's daughter. She was set to inherit her father's watch shop, but then she got engaged and her father changed his will that it would go to her fiance, and then her father died and the fiance dumped her. And right at the beginning of the book, she goes into the watch shop to confront him. After a couple weeks of grieving, she goes to confront her ex-fiance, and there's someone else in the store, in the shop, and they drag her out and things unfold from there. I really enjoyed it. I think this is part of a series, Glass and Steel. Oh, it's a very long, wow, okay. There's 13 books in the series. I don't know if I feel that committed, but I'm interested. It's a historical fantasy mystery series. I mean, I like it when historical books mesh with either fantasy or mystery, and the fact that it does with both, that's really great. So I will probably try book 2 and see if it's worth continuing. Then a reread for me, I read Orbiting Jupiter by Gary D. Schmidt, because he has I think it's a book 2 to this coming out this summer. It's called Jupiter Rising. So this has to do with a boy in foster care who goes into this home. So we are mainly with, I think our main character is Jack, and it's his home that this foster boy Joseph goes to live with, and we kind of get Joseph's story a little bit. He was a juvenile delinquent, has a history, and Gary D. Schmidt, he breaks my heart. I gave this book 4 stars. I think it almost would have been a 5-star book, but I personally don't like the ending. My daughter disagrees with me. She thinks the ending makes it a 5-star book, but we'll just disagree on that one. But I am very curious to continue the story. Gary D. Schmidt does a really good job hitting heavy topics. So really enjoyed the story. Just want to tweak the ending. Next up, an ebook I read this month is The Girl Who Kept the Castle by Ryan Grodin. This book is coming out on June 18th. So it's a middle grade fantasy story set in this world where there's a wizard for each direction, so north, east, south, west, and our main character, Faye, I think that's her name, she lives with Wizard West, and this has such a great first line. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I love it when books have great first sentences. Okay, the first sentence is, Wizard West was dead for nearly an entire day before he noticed. And so our main character, Faye, is tasked with telling him that he died, and everyone in the castle is worried because he has a tendency to like cast spells on people if he doesn't like what they have to tell him. And so Wizard West never appointed an apprentice. So because he's dead, there's no one to take his place. So the whole goal is to fool everyone outside the castle into thinking he's still alive, and he's gonna hold like a tournament for figuring out who his next apprentice is. And the book is both funny and deep and dark and light, and I definitely think my 11-year-old is gonna like this. It has humor, but it has depth, and it has darkness, but light triumphs, and I really like to see that. Plus, the chapter 1 is called Toads Can Still Use Typewriters. I love creative titles that make you really want to read the chapter to know what's going on. Okay, and then a short ebook novella that I read is The Light That Takes by Karen Norton. This is a prequel to The Blood of the Stars. And then her book 2 is coming to Kickstarter in the fall. So I gave that one 4 stars. It's 42 pages. I don't know if I can say much. We follow characters from Blood of the Stars when they are kids. I'll just say that. My last audiobook for the month was Hybrid by Candice Cade. This is the second book in this series. Book 1 was Enhanced. Book 2 is Hybrid. I gave this one 4 stars as well. In this world, people can be enhanced. Their parents before they're born can choose what types of enhancements they want to give them. They can make them an aqua so they can breathe underwater, or is it called a flyer? I think it's just called a flyer, so they can fly. Different kinds of things. Naturals that have no enhancements are very much frowned upon, and our main character is one. Her name is Urban, and in book 1 she went to university and she really had to try to hide her natural status. I really enjoy the tech in this world. So pretty much you have like contact lenses that you can like read different things. You can get your news there, different stats for different people. And I won't say anything specific about book 2 because that's kind of always spoilery, but I obviously enjoyed book 1 enough recently that I read a book 2, so I think that says something. And the last book that I finished in May was The Big Four by Agatha Christie. This one I did a video for my patrons for. This one is a Poirot mystery, but it is very much a bunch of short stories. So this one I struggled with at first because I kind of thought we were getting one big mystery, but we weren't really. They were a bunch of short stories that kind of all tied together into a bit of a bigger mystery. So there's this group called the Big Four that are trying to take over the world, really. It's what was it? A Chinaman, an American, a French woman, and another. And every few chapters or so, Poirot and Hastings find a mystery, solve a mystery, learn about one of the characters, then they're into another mystery and they solve it and learn a little bit more, and it just kind of goes throughout the story. So it was good once I realized what I was kind of getting into, but it won't be a favorite of mine. I'm actually going to throw one more book on here. I'm just about done. Generous Justice. This was my by Tim Keller. This was my patron of the month's pick for the month. I had a hard time finding it after we moved. I was gonna start reading it and I couldn't find it. I had all these boxes labeled current books, couldn't find it. It was in a box labeled kitchen, which in hindsight, I had been thinking like, oh, I'll unpack the kitchen stuff first. I just didn't realize how long it was gonna take to unpack, so it wasn't the best idea. So I'm not quite done it, but I'm like really, really close. And since it was my patron of the month for May's pick, I figured I'd talk about it. So the subtitle is How God's Grace Makes Us Just, and it's really just about why we should be just as Christians, as followers of Christ, the mercy that's been granted to us and how we need to share that. It was not revolutionary to me, but I've always been, or like had a heart for the poor ever since I was a kid and would watch World Vision commercials or the show, and you'd see like the African kids with flies buzzing around their face. Like, I was always all in. It might be slightly evidenced in the makeup of my family, with a biological kid, a kid adopted from Africa, and 2 indigenous foster children. You can see it's playing out in my life a little bit. So it's really good. It wasn't revolutionary. He wrote this in 2010 though, when I feel like there was like a social justice movement kicking off, and I would have been curious if he would have come back and edited this book a bit or revised it prior to his death, because the social justice movement, I think, went a little too far. And so, I mean, maybe the little bit of this I haven't read yet, we'll talk about that, but I also think we need to be cautious with how, like, yeah, with where we're at on that. Mostly done. Feel like I can review it. Would recommend it. Still, definitely my favorite Tim Keller book is Prodigal God. That one is quite a bit better. Like, that one was definitely a favorite of mine. But if you feel like you would like help having more mercy and being a more just person, then I would recommend checking out this book. Okay, I'm so excited to finish the month of May and get into June and June's reading, because it's gonna be good. I know it's gonna be good. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I would love to hear what some of your favorite books were from the month of June. No, that's the wrong month. The month of May. I'm already in June mode. Let me know what you loved in May. If it's a book that I recommended to you, or a book I haven't read before, a book you want me to read, let me know.